Walk us through the resilience roadmap, the 7 guideposts, if you will, just briefly, and maybe we can chat about that for a second.
For sure, yeah. And this, Scott, this comes from, these steps came from reverse engineering the experience, right? So I tell folks in my presentations, it turns out, I found out in doing the research for the book, that all of these things are backed by psychology and science, but I didn't know that. When I developed it first, I just went, okay, how did we, and I say we because it's a family journey. Anytime someone's dealing with a major challenge like this, your family walks through it, right? Or at least the people close to you, whoever those people are. And they're affected in different ways than I was and vice versa. But how did we survive, and not just physically survive, but how do we mentally, emotionally keep it together? Why are we still a family together at the end of this? Because oftentimes the statistics on parents who have sick children is that there's a much higher divorce rate than other families. And it came down to these 7 things. And so the first one is acknowledge, right? So let's just let's face the fact that there's a problem here. And by the way, the whole idea of this framework is, I think it applies to every challenge we face, big or small. Obviously, if it's bigger, we're going to spend more time at each of the steps. Sometimes we're going to skip some of them if it's a shorter thing. But the first one is just like, hey, we got an issue here. Whether that's, you need a transplant, or it's, hey, I got to drop 10 pounds. Like, whatever it is, we're going to face the problem first, or we're never going to deal with it. And then it's agency, which is, by that I mean personal agency. So our realization that each of us has the capacity and the ability to respond in some way. Now, we've been talking a lot about like what parts of things can we not respond to, or what parts are outside of our control, but there are always aspects that are inside our control. And recognizing that we have that power is important, because again, a lot of folks discount that, right? They go right to victimhood and say, woe is me, life isn't fair. And unless and until you accept that you have some responsibility in a situation, you're not likely to do anything because you feel like it doesn't matter. Then we go to acceptance. So what are the aspects I need to let go of so that I have more of my time and energy available to deal with the problem, which takes us to adaptation. We're dealing with a challenge, which means probably our lives have changed in some way. We need to change with it, right? So whether that's, I got to go and move to Toronto because I'm needing a transplant, or, COVID just hit and we have to change how we do everything in some capacity. Most of us as human beings resist change, and we make change harder on ourselves than it needs to be. And we blame that on change when really the blame lies here, because I've failed to adapt proactively and I'm resisting and trying to hold on to what used to be. So we begin the adaptation process. And then sometimes people will say, well, okay, that sounds good, but I don't know about you, I feel like the world's changing faster and faster, and I feel like I'm adapting all the time, and I'm kind of getting tired of adapting all the time. I want things to just kind of stay still for a little bit. And that's probably not going to happen. I mean, the rate of change seems to continue to increase. So how do we sustain the adaptation? And that's where we come to aspiration, which is, where am I trying to go? Am I really clear about what my goals are? My experience has been that when people know what they want and why they want it, and they're really clear about that, people can do some pretty remarkable things. Most of us have capacity we've never tapped into because we haven't pushed ourselves enough, and we haven't pushed ourselves enough because we haven't figured out something that we really want to fight for. And once we do, whether that's our family, whether that's our health, whether that's a career, whatever it is, suddenly we tap into this whole new level of capacity. And then finally, it's assessment. So every so often, it's important to kind of go, okay, is this working? Because, I skipped one. Action is in between there. So once we have the aspiration, it's put the plan into action. Again, I do something that most people call motivational speaking. And I'm not a super fan of that word, only because I know what some the stereotype that brings to mind for some people. And the stereotype tends to be somebody who's just like, rah, rah, you can do anything, like, go get them. And the flaw with that is, like, it's great to have dreams and goals, but if we're not going to then remember that we got to do something, we got to take some action, right? Nothing changes. So it's great to, like, write down your New Year's resolutions. But if you're going to live January 2nd the same way you lived the last year, then probably nothing's going to change, right? So we have to take some action, and then finally is this assessment where we go, okay, I've been taking action for 3 months. Is this working? Is it not working? Do I need to tweak something? Do I need to change something? This happens a lot when I work with organizations, companies, where they've created an action plan for a quarter or a year. And because they set that plan out and they put it on paper and they said, okay, team, this is what we're doing, they want to stick to it, even if it's not working. Right? Like, well, this is what we do. Well, okay, but if it's not getting you the result, then maybe we need to do something different. And so that's the resilience roadmap in a nutshell.
So you applied this, after you had your transplant. While you're in the hospital, you decide that you're going to run a marathon. And so prior to this, it was probably impossible, but now it was not probable, but it became possible. And because you set the goal and you had I guess, walk us through the why. Walk us through, you just went through the seven guideposts. What was your why? What was your purpose? And what was driving you to do this? And then walk us through what it was like when you accomplished it the first time.
Right. So, I think initially the why was can I prove to myself that this is possible? In some weird way, I thought this is like the ultimate test of these new organs and my health, right? Like I'm feeling way better than I did before. If I could do that, to me, that would represent like the ultimate in health, because the context for everybody listening is pre-transplant, in the days, weeks, months prior, because of my heart issues, I couldn't like climb a flight of stairs without stopping halfway up, because I would get, winded, short of breath very easily. And so I thought, well, what greater demonstration of heart and lung capacity is there than to do some endurance sport? And I'd been a distance runner, so to speak. I mean, I'd run some 10Ks when I was a teenager, and I was always better at long and slow than short and fast because I was little. So I always joked that the big kids could go faster, but I could probably go further than they could. So I was more inclined to endurance sports anyway. But I thought, yeah, I wonder if I could run a marathon. And then it was the challenge to say, okay, how do I go from literally walking a few steps on a treadmill with hoses coming out of me, 7 days after the transplant, kind of very basic rehab, like walk again, to running a marathon? Like, what's that going to look like? And what's the path? And how long will that take? And in my case, it took 2.5 years. About 7 or 8 months out, I could jog a 5K very slowly. And by a 1.5 years, I ran a half marathon, and then go from the marathon to the full marathon took, another almost a year to get to that level of endurance. But once I did it, then I went, okay, bring it on, right? Like, if I can do that, then what else? What can I not do?
Yeah. It also brings up the value of setting goals for yourself and achieving them, even if they're difficult. When you're working towards a bigger purpose, you are more inclined to make adjustments, to adapt, to provide action. I mean, you had to break it down into such small little bites. You couldn't eat the elephant day one. You couldn't go run, but you could take one bite at a time. And that's really what you had to do, to the smallest level.
Yeah, 100%. You hit it, right? People who struggle, I always say, people often will, I'll get a phone call or an email. Hey, come talk to our group. We want you to motivate our people. And I'll always say, I can't do that. And I can't do that because I don't know what motivates each individual person in that room. Only they know that. But once they know that, and they may not even know until they've kind of done some inner work and figured it out. But once they know, then they're going to tap into that capacity in a way that they never have before. And they can do some amazing things, but they need to do the work to figure that out. And I can do some things to help them with that. So yeah, I had this big purpose to prove to myself that I could do that thing. And then once I did that thing, I was like, okay, well, what other things might I want to do? And the other thing to your point is when you do difficult things and you succeed, it proves to you that you can do that, right? It proves to yourself, oh, I can do these things. And so when the next challenge comes, you're going to have that armor with you of like, oh, I've done stuff like this before, right? And maybe I haven't faced this particular situation, but I've got this history, I've got this track record of doing challenging things. And so if I can do that, one of my favorite phrases to give my coaching clients to remember is if I can do that, then I can do this, right? So go back through your life and go, well, wait a minute, I'm the same person that did this, and this. If I'm the person that did that, I can probably handle whatever this thing is, because 99% of the time, you're not facing the biggest challenge of your life today. You're facing something, right? And so you got to go back and go, wait a minute, I'm that same person that did that thing, so I can do this thing.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.